I am Renee May, 42 years old, and I am a Chief Petty Officer in the United States Navy. But to my family back in Boston, I'm just Navy Renee. 3 weeks before my cousin Mark's lavish wedding, I got the call from my Aunt Clara. Her voice was soft, the one she uses to hide a cruel command. "Renee, dear," she said, "Chloe's father will be there. He's a very big deal in the defense world. I hope you'll, well, not wear your uniform. It's a bit intimidating, you know. And please don't talk about your job, all right? Just say you're in logistics. Don't make people uncomfortable with those war stories. We need this to be perfect for Mark." Aunt Clara didn't know that this big deal was desperately trying to sell a new weapons system to the Navy. And I, Logistics Renee, was the one deciding if his billion-dollar contract lived or died. They wanted me to be silent. They were wrong. If you have ever been asked by your own family to hide who you are for their own image, let me know where you're from in the comments. Hit that like button and listen to the story of how the truth found its way to the surface. The day of the call, I was in my office at Naval Base Coronado in San Diego. My window was open just enough to let in that specific Southern California scent, a precise mix of Pacific salt and the sharp metallic tang of jet fuel from the airfield. It was the smell of my world, my sanctuary. It had been a long day, a 12-hour marathon session evaluating new telemetry data for guidance hardware. That's a sterile way of saying I spent the day staring at columns of numbers that determine whether a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment hits a target the size of a dinner plate from 100 miles away, or if it fails and gets good people killed. The mental fatigue was heavier than any rucksack. I leaned back in my standard-issue government chair, the springs groaning in protest, and finally, gratefully, unlaced my heavy combat boots. One boot, then the other, hit the gray linoleum floor with a dull, satisfying thud. That sound was freedom. It was the signal that the uniform, the responsibility, could be set aside for a few hours. I was rubbing my temples, trying to work the persistent, grinding headache out from behind my eyes when my desk phone rang. The sound was jarring, an unwelcome intrusion into the quiet I'd just begun to earn. I glanced at the caller ID. Aunt Clara. My stomach didn't just tighten, it seized. It was an involuntary physical reaction. Just seeing that name, Boston, private, flash on the display made me have to physically brace myself. You don't just talk to my family back in Boston, you prepare for it. You put on a different kind of armor. My world here in San Diego was about competence, about results, about the mission. Their world, the one that phone call represented, was about appearances, about bloodlines, about who you knew at Harvard. I took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and pasted on the fake, bright cheer I'd perfected over 20 years of dealing with them. It was a voice I hated. "Aunt Clara, how are you?" Silence. There was no, "I'm fine, how are you?" in return. Aunt Clara doesn't do conversational volleys. She doesn't do small talk. She navigates conversations like a torpedo, locking onto a target and proceeding in a straight line. Her voice, that silky, old-money New England accent that could make a death threat sound like an invitation to tea, slid right into my ear. "Renee, dear, I'm calling about Mark's wedding." I could already hear the unspoken "but" hanging in the air. I gripped the receiver a little tighter. "It's all coming together beautifully," she continued, her voice dripping with an artificial sweetness that set my teeth on edge. "The caterer is finalized. They did the governor's ball, you know. And the string quartet is simply divine. Chloe's family, Renee," she paused here for effect. "They are just, well, they're on another level. Her father is an extremely important man." I waited, saying nothing. I knew this wasn't just a social update. This was the preamble to an execution. "And that's why," she said, the silkiness in her voice turning a shade cooler, the warmth dropping out of it. "Your uncle and I were hoping you would be understanding." There it was, the bomb. "We really must insist that you don't wear your uniform." I blinked. Just blinked. I automatically looked down at the sleeve of my own uniform, the one I was still wearing. The 3 red chevrons and the rocker of a chief petty officer. An insignia I had bled for. An insignia I had earned by being smarter, faster, and tougher than everyone around me for 2 decades. It's just... She sighed, a long, drawn-out sound of exasperation, as if she were explaining basic math to a difficult child. It's so... masculine, Renee. It makes people uncomfortable. It's aggressive. Chloe's father is a very refined, very subtle man. We don't want to... startle him. Startle him, I thought. I've led men who have been in actual firefights, and he's going to be startled by my uniform? I tried to find my voice. It came out weaker than I wanted, almost a plea. Auntie, it's my service dress uniform. It's what I wear for formal events. It's the equivalent of a tuxedo. Oh, don't be difficult, dear, she snapped. And just like that, the silkiness was gone, replaced by pure, cold steel. The real Aunt Clara. Don't complicate things. This is a party, not a military parade. It's Mark's special day. Just wear a dress. Go to Nordstrom, buy a nice, pretty little flowery dress. Look a little more feminine. You understand. The request was a slap. The suggestion was a fist. It wasn't just about the uniform anymore. It was about me. I was the problem. I wasn't feminine. I was an inconvenience. But she wasn't done. The killing blow was yet to come. And while we're on the subject, she added, her voice regaining that false lightness, when you're mingling, please don't talk about your job. It's just unsettling. All that talk of guns and deployments and, well, whatever it is you do. It's not appropriate dinner conversation. My throat was dry. I couldn't believe this was happening. What am I supposed to say I do? I asked, and my voice was barely a whisper. Aunt Clara laughed. It was a light, airy, tinkling sound that held zero humor. It was the sound of a dismissal. Oh, who cares, dear? Just say you're in logistics. That's simple enough, isn't it? It's vague. It's perfect. Logistics. 24 years of service, multiple deployments, leading sailors in combat zones. The right to be called chief by men and women who would trust me with their lives. The expertise that had me evaluating billion-dollar guidance systems just this afternoon. All of it, my entire life, my entire identity, reduced to a beige, meaningless, invisible word. Logistics. All so I wouldn't embarrass them. We just need this to be perfect for Mark, she concluded, her voice all silk and command again, the matter settled. You understand. We'll see you in 3 weeks. The line clicked. She had hung up. I didn't say anything else. I just held the receiver in my hand, listening to the hollow drone of the dial tone. It buzzed in my ear for 10, maybe 15 seconds. My hand felt numb. Finally, slowly, I placed it back in its cradle. I sat there, motionless. I didn't move a muscle. The only sound in the room was the low hum of the air ventilation and the distant, lonely cry of a gull outside. The silence that had felt peaceful and earned just minutes before now felt heavy, suffocating. It was the silence of a vacuum. I looked at my faint reflection in the dark computer monitor. I saw the fatigue in my eyes, the lines of stress around my mouth. I saw the small polished American flag pin on my collar. I saw the insignia on my sleeve. I didn't cry. Crying was a luxury I couldn't afford. It was a release I hadn't earned. In my world, you don't cry. You assess, you plan, you execute. Instead, I just felt a cold, sharp chill creep right down my spine, settling deep in my bones. It wasn't the air from the window. It was a cold from the inside out. It was a familiar feeling, the feeling of being erased by my own family. That familiar feeling. The cold that had settled into my bones from Aunt Clara's phone call wasn't just about a wedding or a uniform. It was an echo. It was the combined weight of every single time I'd been dismissed, overlooked, and made to feel small by my own family. As I sat there in the silence of my San Diego office, the past didn't just knock on the door, it kicked it down. It started with the name, Navy Renee. It sounds harmless, doesn't it? Maybe even affectionate, like Dr. Bob or Farmer Joe. But it wasn't. It was a label of dismissal. It was a neat little box they put me in to separate me from the real world, their world. In our family, my cousin Mark, who worked for some high-flying private equity firm in Boston, was never Finance Mark. He was Mark, or as Aunt Clara would say with a proud sigh, Mark, our boy genius. He was the standard, I was the footnote, the oddity, the career path that was spoken of with a sympathetic head tilt. I remember Aunt Clara at a garden party one summer, speaking to one of her friends just loudly enough for me to hear. "Oh, Renee, yes, she's still doing that soldier thing," she'd said, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "The poor thing. We just hope she finds a real life one of these days." I was 28 at the time and had just earned my first major promotion. But to them, it was just a game I was playing. The worst of it, the absolute worst, always came during the holidays. Those sacred American institutions of family togetherness, Christmas and Thanksgiving, were their grandest stages for this quiet, relentless cruelty. I remember Christmas, 2 years ago. I'd managed to get leave, flying all night from a briefing in Bahrain to make it to Boston. I was exhausted, still jet-lagged, but happy to be there. The whole family was gathered in Aunt Clara's immaculate, oak-paneled living room. It was a room designed to look old, to smell like old money, right down to the towering, professionally decorated Christmas tree that probably cost more than my first car. We were all opening gifts. Mark, of course, went first. He opened a long, thin box. Inside was a gleaming Rolex. "A little something for that big promotion, Mark," my uncle announced. The room erupted in oohs and ahs. Mark held it up, grinning, and everyone clapped. He was the king. Then it was my turn. I was handed a small, brightly wrapped box. I opened it. Inside was a large, bright pink coffee mug with the words "Girl Boss" written on it in bubbly, glittery letters. "I saw it at the mall and just thought of you, dear." Aunt Clara beamed. The room was silent. Girl boss? I was a chief petty officer. I had just returned from a 6-month deployment in the Persian Gulf, advising on operations in the Strait of Hormuz. I'd managed logistics, equipment, and the lives of 24 sailors in one of the most volatile places on Earth. And my big promotion gift was a pink mug. I just smiled. I smiled that tight, brittle smile I had perfected. "Thank you, Auntie. It's lovely." I didn't mention the deployment. No one asked. But the Girl Boss mug was nothing compared to Thanksgiving last year. That was the one that truly broke me. We were all at the dining table, a scene straight out of a Norman Rockwell painting if you didn't look too close. The table was groaning under the weight of a massive, perfectly roasted turkey, bowls of stuffing, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and cranberry sauce. The air smelled rich and warm. The conversation, as always, orbited around Mark, his new condo in Back Bay, his bonus, a multi-million-dollar deal he was structuring. He spoke in acronyms and financial jargon, and my aunt and uncle just nodded along, their faces shining with pride. I waited for a pause, just wanting to be part of the conversation. "I actually just got back from a training op," I offered, my voice sounding too loud in the pause. "Off the Horn of Africa. We were running anti-piracy drills." Mark didn't even let me finish. He let out a short, barking laugh. "Anti-piracy? Oh, that's fascinating, Renee." He turned to the rest of the table, a smirk playing on his lips. "Sounds like a travel agent for boats, doesn't it?" The table erupted in laughter. My uncle chuckled. Aunt Clara tittered behind her napkin. Even Mark's younger sister giggled. A travel agent. They were all laughing. I just stared down at my plate. My face burned hot with a shame so intense it almost made me dizzy. I felt small. I felt like a child. I felt erased. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that if my dad had still been alive, he would have slammed his hand on that polished mahogany table. He would have silenced the laughter with one of his stares. "You will respect your cousin," he would have growled, his voice rough like sandpaper. "She does more real work in one day than you've done in your entire life." But my dad was gone. He'd been gone for 10 years, and with him, my only defender, my only ally in this family, was gone too. If you've ever been in a room, even at a holiday table, and felt completely invisible. If you've ever been the one who gets laughed at or dismissed while the golden child of the family can do no wrong. Just let me know in the comments by typing, "I know that feeling." Please hit that like button to show some support, because honestly, that feeling is one of the loneliest in the world. I couldn't stay at the table. I mumbled something about needing the restroom and stood up, my legs shaky. I walked out of the dining room, but instead of going to the bathroom, I found myself walking down the hall to my dad's old study. Aunt Clara kept it as a sort of shrine, though it was nothing like the rest of her house. My dad was a carpenter, a blue-collar guy. He built things with his hands, calloused, strong, honest hands. He had despised all of this phoniness. He despised the obsession with appearances and money. I opened the door. The room still smelled like him, like sawdust and old books and pipe tobacco. I walked over to his old roll-top desk and opened the bottom drawer. It squeaked. There, beneath a stack of old blueprints, was the compass. It was an old, heavy brass compass. He had given it to me the day I left for boot camp. I remembered his words as he pressed it into my palm. "This world, Renee," he'd said, gesturing to the house, "it's all pretend. It's all smoke and mirrors. But what you're going to do, that's a real job. That has honor." He closed my fingers around the compass. "Don't you let them make you lose your way, girl." I stood there in the quiet of his study, the sound of their distant laughter still filtering in from the dining room. I gripped that cold, heavy brass in my hand. And as I stood there, that was when I finally understood. When Aunt Clara called me today, when she told me to wear a flowery dress and lie about my job, she wasn't just asking me to be quiet. She wasn't just embarrassed by my uniform. She was asking me to betray my father. She was asking me to agree with them, to admit after all these years that my dad was wrong and they were right, that my life was the pretend one and Mark's was the real one. She was asking me to take that compass my father gave me and to throw it in the trash. The heavy, cold brass of my father's compass felt like an anchor in my pocket as I left his study. The laughter and chatter from the Thanksgiving table, Mark's world, felt like it was a million miles away. The next morning, I was in my world. It was 8:08 Pacific time. The day after the call from Aunt Clara. I hadn't slept. The cold, familiar sting of her words, of Mark's laughter, of the girl boss mug had just circled in my head all night. But there's no room for that when you have a job to do. You compartmentalize, you lock it in a box, you shove it down, and you perform. Failure in my world has consequences they can't even imagine. I stood at the head of a long polished table in the TACO, the Tactical Operations Center at Coronado. This room was the polar opposite of Aunt Clara's oak-paneled living room. There was no art on the walls, no plush carpets, no antique furniture. This room was painted a flat, sterile gray. It was filled with massive, humming data screens, secure comms links, and topological maps. There were no decorations unless you count the framed rules of engagement by the door. The air was cold, recycled, and carried the lingering, acrid smell of burnt, 24-hour-old coffee, the perfume of the military at work. The room was packed. My direct CO, Commander Evans, was on my right. Several other officers, captains, commanders lined the table, their notebooks open, their faces set. At the far end of the table sat Rear Admiral Stanton, a 2-star, a man who reported directly to the Pentagon. And they were all, every single one of them, silent. They were silent because I was standing. And when I stand in this room, I talk and they listen. The subject was Project Neptune, the new coastal defense weapons system from the Jennings Corporation. The contractor Chloe's father was part of. The very important man Aunt Clara was so desperate to impress. I clicked the remote in my hand. The main screen lit up with columns of data, telemetry, firing solutions, error rates. "Good morning, Admiral gentlemen," I began. My voice was crisp, steady, and devoid of all emotion. It was a voice they knew. It was the voice of the chief. "I've completed the final field stress test analysis for Project Neptune, and we have a catastrophic failure. I let that hang in the air. A few of the officers shifted in their seats. If you'll look at the data from test cycle 4, I continued, pointing with the laser. The system performs within parameters under standard conditions, but the moment we introduce simulated electronic countermeasures, jamming, spoofing, the kind of interference we know our adversaries will use, the guidance system glitched. I clicked to the next slide. A video feed played. A target drone. A missile launched. The missile veered, wildly, tragically, off course. The system's targeting computer has a 2.5-second lag when processing conflicting data, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. It's a fatal flaw. The contractor has been trying to patch it with software, but this isn't a software problem. It's a hardware problem. I turned from the screen to face the Admiral directly. I looked him right in the eye. Admiral, I said, my voice calm but absolute. A 2.5-second delay in a simulated environment is a non-starter. In a real-world combat scenario, 2.5 seconds is the difference between intercepting the threat and becoming a name on a memorial wall. I paused, letting the full weight of that statement land. I cannot, in good conscience, sign off on this system. I am officially recommending we reject the current build, halt the contract, and send it back to the contractor for a complete hardware redesign. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My authority in this room wasn't based on my family name or my social standing. It was based on 24 years of being right when it mattered most. The room was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpeted floor. The two-star admiral, a man who commanded fleets, just stared at me, his fingers steepled in front of his face. He didn't look at his aides. He didn't look at the other officers. He just looked at me. Finally, he nodded. Once. Chief May's analysis is, as usual, irrefutable, he said, his voice a low gravel. He then looked around the table at the other officers. This office is rejecting the Neptune build, effective immediately. Send the full report back to the contractor. And I want to make this clear. We will not spend one more taxpayer dollar on this system until she says it's safe. He pointed directly at me. Thank you, Chief, he said. That will be all. Admiral. In this room, no one called me Renee. No one called me Navy Renee. They called me Chief. They called me Ma'am, even the junior officers. They called me by the rank I had earned. Here, my voice didn't just matter. It was final. I gathered my notes and walked out of the taco, the heavy door hissing shut behind me. I stood in the hallway for a moment, the adrenaline from the briefing beginning to fade, and the familiar, cold ache from the night before creeping back in. And that's when I thought of Mark. I thought of his condescending laugh at the Thanksgiving table. Sounds like a travel agent for boats, doesn't it? A bitter, humorless smile touched my lips. If only he knew. If only that entire table of laughing, superficial critics knew that the travel agent for boats had just, with a few sentences, stopped a $1.2 billion defense contract dead in its tracks. A contract belonging to the very important man they were all so desperate to impress. That's when I truly understood the difference between our two worlds and why they would never, ever be able to see me. Mark's world, Aunt Clara's world. It was all built on money, on who you knew, on what you owned, on the glitter of a Rolex watch. It was a house of cards. My world, the world of the taco. The world of sailors whose names I knew and whose lives I was responsible for. It was built on something else entirely. It was built on consequences, on responsibility, on lives. They couldn't understand my world. And in that moment, I realized I was done trying to make them. I walked out of the taco feeling that strange, sharp contrast between the absolute authority I held in that room and the complete powerlessness I felt in my own family. The $1.2 billion travel agent was still reeling from Aunt Clara's phone call, still feeling the sting of Mark's laughter at the Thanksgiving table. I was halfway back to my own office, lost in that cold, internal fog, when I heard a voice call out, "Chief, got a minute?" I stopped and turned. It was Commander Evans, my CO. He was standing at the door of his office, his cover, his hat, tucked under his arm. "Sir?" I replied, snapping back to military bearing. My office. Shut the door. My heart rate kicked up a notch. This wasn't standard procedure. A closed-door meeting right after a high-stakes briefing usually meant one of two things. You were getting a medal, or you were in deep trouble. And I had a sinking feeling it wasn't the first. Had I overstepped with the Admiral? Was my personal stress bleeding through? I walked in. His office was just like mine. Gray, functional, piled high with binders and technical manuals. No frills. The only personal items were a framed photo of his wife and kids on his desk and a small, slightly ridiculous-looking bobblehead of a Navy football player. He wasn't a man who put on airs. Have a seat, Chief, he said, gesturing to the simple steel-framed chair opposite his desk. He didn't sit down immediately. He walked over to the small coffee pot in the corner and poured a thick black sludge into a mug. He gestured with the pot toward me. Coffee? No, thank you, sir. He took a sip of his own, grimaced, and then sat down. He didn't circle the topic. Commander Evans was a rip-the-band-aid-off kind of leader. First off, your analysis of the Neptune system was dead on, he said, his voice all business. Stanton was impressed. You saved us a hell of a lot of trouble down the line. Good work. Thank you, sir. Just doing my job. He leaned forward, placing the mug on his desk. The businesslike efficiency in his eyes softened, replaced by something else. A keen analytical scrutiny that wasn't aimed at my work, but at me. That's the thing, Chief, he said, his voice quiet. You always do your job. You're probably the most reliable expert I've ever had under my command. But today, in that briefing, you looked like you just swallowed a bad screw. I must have looked surprised because he continued. I know that report. You've had the data for a week. You've known about that hardware flaw for days. But the way you delivered that final recommendation, there was a different kind of fire in it, something personal. He held up a hand. This isn't an official inquiry, May. I'm not questioning your professionalism. I'm asking if you're okay. Is this about something other than the Neptune system? Something personal? I stared at him. After 24 years in the Navy, you get very, very good at building walls. You learn to be tough. You learn to compartmentalize. You learn that showing personal weakness, especially as a woman in a high-ranking position, is a liability. My default programming was screaming at me to say, no, sir, everything is fine, sir. But he was my CO. We had been working together for 3 years. We'd been through 2 deployments, countless stress-filled simulations, and one very real, very frightening situation in the South China Sea. He was a good man. He was a fair man. And I was just tired. The armor was heavy. I took a deep breath, a shaky one. It felt like I was stepping off a cliff. It is, sir, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It's my family. I hadn't planned to say any more, but it was like a dam had broken. The words just came tumbling out, quiet and raw. It's my cousin's wedding, back in Boston. My aunt called yesterday. I looked down at my own hands, clasped tightly in my lap. They're ashamed of my uniform. They asked me not to wear it. They said it was too masculine. Intimidating. I could feel a hot flush of humiliation creeping up my neck. They want me to lie about my job, I continued, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. They want me to tell this very important man that I'm in. Logistics. Also, I don't embarrass them. So I don't ruin the party for my cousin. I finally looked up, expecting to see pity, or maybe even awkwardness. I saw neither. Commander Evans's face had hardened. It was a look I'd seen before, the one he got right before he was about to rip into a contractor for cutting corners. It was a still, cold anger. But it wasn't directed at me. It was directed for me. He was quiet for a long time, just looking at me. He wasn't just hearing me, he was seeing me. He was seeing the humiliation my own family was blind to. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long, slow breath. Wall Street, he said, his voice a low rumble. Sir? My brother, he explained, his eyes distant for a second. He's on Wall Street. Makes about 10 times what I do. Wears a $3,000 suit to work every day. He picked up his coffee mug and stared into it. Last time I saw him at my kid's christening, he spent the whole time making jokes about my uniform. Asked me how my little armed cosplay was going. He snorted, a bitter, humorless sound. Then he actually asked me if I'd shot anyone yet, like it was a video game. Right in front of my wife. He looked up, and his eyes met mine. And in that moment, there was no rank. There was no commander and no chief. There were just two people who understood. Some people may, he said, his voice full of a weary, ironclad certainty, will never understand what service means. They are physically incapable of it. Their brains are wired to see value only in dollar signs and social status. They will look at your sacrifice, your expertise, and your honor. And all they will see is something inconvenient. He leaned forward again, his gaze intense. Do not, he said, let those people cheapen you. Do not let them take what you've earned and make it small. I just nodded. I couldn't speak. A huge, painful knot in my chest that I hadn't even realized I was carrying suddenly eased. It was the feeling of a heavy pack being lifted off my shoulders. I felt seen. Thank you, sir, I managed to say, and my voice was thick with an emotion I couldn't name. We take care of our own, Chief, he said, the businesslike tone returning just a little. He stood up, and I stood with him. The meeting was over. You're dismissed. Aye, sir. I turned to leave, my hand on the doorknob. Oh, and Chief? He said, as if it were an afterthought. I turned back. Sir? This very important man. This person they're so worried about you, intimidating. Who is it? A Mr. Jennings, sir, I said, from the Jennings Corporation. Commander Evans's eyes, which had been warm with empathy, suddenly lit up with a completely different kind of light. It was a sharp, tactical, almost mischievous glint. Jennings, he said, drawing the name out. A slow smile spread across his face. Well, isn't that fascinating? He walked around his desk, a new energy in his step. You know, Chief, if you find yourself needing any actual logistics for this trip, or perhaps, say, a formal officer escort in full-service dress whites, you just say the word. For the first time since Aunt Clara's call, a small, genuine smile touched my own lips. It felt foreign, but it was real. I'll keep that in mind, Commander. Thank you. Good, he said. Now get out of here. You've earned it. I left Commander Evans's office with a strange lightness in my chest. That brief, genuine moment of connection, of being seen and understood by someone I respected, felt like a shield. For the first time, the thought of the wedding in Boston didn't just fill me with dread. It now had this new, almost tactical layer thanks to Evans's parting words. The escort idea. The look in his eye when I said Jennings. It was interesting. I walked back to my own section, the secure lab where my team and I tore apart new technology. The warmth from that conversation carried me through the rest of the afternoon. It was a reminder that my chosen family, my fellow sailors and leaders, had my back, even if my blood family didn't. I spent the next few hours buried in my element. I was in a skiff, a sensitive compartmented information facility. No windows, antiseptic white walls, the constant hum of high-powered servers, and the sharp scent of ozone and electronics. This was my sanctuary. I was working on the Neptune report for Commander Evans, the one the Admiral had requested. My screen was filled with thermal imaging data, diagnostic code, and engineering schematics. I was cross-referencing the heat spike from the guidance module with the power draw from the main reactor. This was my world. A world of facts, data, and consequences. A world where failure was catastrophic but predictable. A world that made sense. My phone, which I was required to keep in a secure locker outside the lab, was the last thing on my mind. Around 17 hours, I finally emerged, blinking in the harsh fluorescent light of the outer corridor, my eyes tired from staring at lines of code. I retrieved my personal effects from the locker, my keys, my wallet, and my phone. The screen lit up. One new text message. It was from Mark. My stomach twisted. After Aunt Clara's call, Mark hadn't reached out. Part of me, a small, stupid, hopeful part, had wondered if he was embarrassed by what she'd said. If maybe, just maybe, he'd call and say, "Hey, don't listen to Mom. Just come, we want you there." That hope died a quick, brutal death as I read the text. The message wasn't an apology, it was a command. It read, "Hey Renee, Aunt Clara told me you understood the situation. Good. Seriously, just don't make it weird at the wedding. Chloe's dad is a really big shot. I need this to go perfectly. I need him on my side." I read the message once, then I read it again, and a third time. I need him on my side. The words swam in front of my eyes. The warmth I'd felt from my conversation with Commander Evans vanished, sucked into a black hole of ice. All the old, familiar coldness from my childhood came rushing back, but this time it was different. It wasn't just sadness. It wasn't just humiliation. It was rage. It was a rage so pure and cold it felt like liquid nitrogen pumping through my veins. Because this wasn't just Mark, the boy genius cousin. This was Mark, the man whose life I had saved. My mind flashed back 10 years. I wasn't a chief then. I was a young petty officer, just back from my very first deployment in the Gulf. It had been 6 months of terror, grit, and loneliness. I'd saved every single dime I'd earned, living on nothing, stashing away that combat pay. I had a little over $10,000 to my name, a fortune I'd earned while dodging bullets. I'd come home to find Mark a complete wreck. His first brilliant startup in Boston had failed. He was 25, drowning in debt, about to be evicted from his crappy one-bedroom apartment in Allston. I found him sitting on his threadbare sofa, surrounded by empty beer bottles, crying. Actually, sobbing. He was broken. "I'm ruined, Renee." He'd wept, his face red and puffy. "I'm going to be homeless. My life is over." He was my cousin, my family. I didn't even hesitate. I went to the bank the next day, withdrew my entire savings, all $10,000 of it, and gave it to him. I paid his rent for the next 6 months and cleared his most urgent debts. It was all the money I had in the world, the money I'd earned while he was back home playing at being a CEO. I still remember the look on his face. He'd grabbed my hands, his own hands soft and unmarked, and he'd cried again. "You saved me, Renee. I swear. I will never, ever forget this. You saved me." He had forgotten. He had taken that money, my deployment money, and climbed his way back up. He'd gotten his fancy job, met his fancy fiancée, and now he was telling me to not make it weird. He was casually tossing me, his savior, aside for a big shot he hadn't even met yet, all to secure his next deal. The rage was so profound, so complete, that I suddenly felt calm. It was the calm of a sniper settling their breathing before the shot. It was a cold, perfect, tactical clarity. I looked at the glowing screen of my phone. I need him on my side. Then I looked up at the heavy steel door of the lab I had just left. Behind that door was my report. The report on the Neptune project. The report detailing every single catastrophic flaw in the system built by the Jennings Corporation. The report that was going to cost Chloe's big shot father hundreds of millions of dollars. My report, my expertise, my power. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It wasn't a nice smile. "Mark," I whispered to the empty corridor, "you have no idea what a big shot actually is." I looked down at the phone one last time. "I need him." "He's the contractor," I said, my voice sharp and precise. "I'm the customer, and I'm the one who decides if his billion-dollar toy is fit to be anything other than a garbage scow." The last remnants of hurt, the last vestige of that little girl hoping for her family's approval, evaporated. It was gone. The girl boss mug, the travel agent jokes, the masculine uniform, it all just clicked into place. I had spent my entire life trying to explain my world to them, trying to make them see my value. I was done explaining. I was going to show them. They wanted logistics Renee. They wanted the quiet, invisible, harmless girl in the flowery dress. Fine, they could have her. And they were about to get a lesson in logistics, national security, and the real-world supply chain that they would never, ever forget. I stood in that sterile, fluorescent-lit corridor for a full minute, my thumb hovering over Mark's text. The old Renee, the Navy Renee they all knew, would have felt that familiar, sickening knot of shame. She would have texted back, "Okay, Mark, whatever you need." She would have swallowed her pain, just like she always did. But the woman standing in that hallway was not Navy Renee. She was Chief Petty Officer May. And she had just spent an entire day documenting a catastrophic failure, a failure that could get people killed. That cold, precise anger from the lab hadn't faded. It had solidified. It had turned from a feeling into a purpose. Mark's text wasn't just an insult. It was a tactical error. He had just confirmed the identities of the key players. He had just provided me with the motive. And I already had the weapon, the Neptune report sitting on the server behind me. This was no longer a family squabble. This was a mission. My entire thought process shifted. The hurt receded, and the 24 years of training took over. I didn't see a big-shot CEO. I saw a failing contractor. I didn't see a perfect wedding. I saw a target-rich environment. I turned on my heel, my boots echoing with sharp, sudden purpose. I didn't go home. I went straight back to my office, the one with the American flag visible outside the window. I sat down, the screen illuminating my face in the dark, and I pulled up a secure line. My fingers didn't even tremble as I dialed. It was after hours, but I knew he'd pick up. Leaders like him always do. He answered on the second ring. "Evans." "Sir," I said, my voice as crisp and steady as it was in the TACO briefing. "It's Chief May. I apologize for the late call." "Never apologize for doing your job, Chief. What's on your mind?" I took a breath. This was it, the point of no return. "Sir, I have an idea regarding the wedding I mentioned." "I'm listening," he said. I could hear the curiosity in his voice, the tactical mind whirring to life. "You mentioned Mr. Jennings of the Jennings Corporation," I said, keeping my voice level. "He is the big shot my family is so concerned about. He will be at the wedding. My aunt has specifically requested that I remain silent about my work." "How convenient for him," Evans said, his voice dripping with dry ice. "Yes, sir. It occurred to me that a large formal social event is a terrible place to conduct official business. But," I paused, "it might be the perfect opportunity for an informal, off-the-record, opportunistic engagement with a failing contractor." There was a short, sharp silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard something I rarely heard from my CO, a low, genuine, appreciative laugh. "Chief May," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "You are something else. I bow to you. That is a brilliant, brilliant idea." He continued, "It's not a family party. It's a key stakeholder engagement. And as your commanding officer, I'd feel a lot better if I were there to provide support and to represent the official command position on the Neptune failure. Make sure Mr. Jennings understands exactly how serious the Admiral is." "That was my hope, sir," I said, allowing a small, cold smile of my own. "Then it's settled," Evans said, his voice all business again. "I'll clear my schedule. I'll fly commercial to Boston. And yes, Chief, I will be wearing my full-service dress whites. We'll give them the official position they're looking for." "Thank you, Commander." "Don't thank me," he said. "This is about accountability. This isn't just about your family, Chief. This is about every sailor who will ever set foot on a ship that relies on Jennings's tech. This isn't revenge. It's justice." He was right. I thought of the young sailors I trained, kids who were barely 20 years old, who trusted me, trusted my analysis to keep them safe. I thought about what would happen if that Neptune system failed during a real engagement because a CEO was more interested in champagne toasts than in fixing a 2.5-second lag. I would not let a spoiled CEO like Jennings and a social climbing, Hallow family like mine put my people at risk. "I understand completely, sir," I said. "Good. Send me the itinerary. I'll see you in Boston, Chief." "Aye, sir." I hung up the phone. The sense of release was overwhelming. The knot of humiliation I'd carried for decades just dissolved. It was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I swiveled in my chair and pulled up a fresh document on my screen. I typed, Operation Boston Common. I smirked. Maybe a little dramatic, but it helped me focus. I began to list out the plan, just as I would for any mission. Phase 1. Infiltration and Observation. Objective 1. Comply with Aunt Clara's request. Arrive at the wedding out of uniform. I'd wear the pretty floral dress she wanted. Tactical camouflage, blend in. Become the invisible Navy Renee they expected. Objective 2. Observe the key players. Locate Jennings. Assess his mood. Observe his interactions with Mark and Chloe. Gather atmospheric data. Phase 2. The trigger. Objective 3. Do not initiate contact. Let the adversary open fire first. Wait for the inevitable insult. Wait for Chloe, or Mark, or even Aunt Clara to make a condescending comment. Phase 3. Engagement. Objective 4. Use their insult as the cover to engage Jennings. Use their public dismissal of my logistics job as the precise, surgical opening to reveal the truth of my role regarding Project Neptune. Objective 5. Support. Commander Evans will arrive at a pre-designated time, 20 Bimquers, breeze, just as the main toasts are concluding. He will enter, in full uniform, as the support element, confirming my authority and the official Navy position. It was a solid plan. Simple, elegant. It used my enemy's own arrogance as a weapon against them. I leaned back, looking at the plan on the screen. Then my eyes drifted to a small, worn piece of paper I had taped to the bezel of my monitor. It was a quote I'd printed out years ago from Theodore Roosevelt. It is not the critic who counts. I thought of Mark, laughing at the Thanksgiving table. I thought of Aunt Clara and her friends, whispering, "Oh, the poor thing, still playing soldier." They were the critics. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood. I thought of my time in the Gulf. I thought of the grime under my nails, the exhaustion so deep it lived in my bones, the terror and the triumph. I was the one in the arena. My family, with their soft hands, their expensive parties, and their cruel, shallow judgments. They were just spectators. Who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. My family. They were the cold and timid souls. Have you ever felt that way? Like you were the only one in the arena, while the people who were supposed to support you were just sitting in the stands, criticizing? If you've ever had to fight your battles alone while the critics watched, just type, "I'm in the arena," in the comments. Let's see how many of us there are. And please hit that like button if you're ready to see what happens when the critic finally meets the warrior. I looked at the quote one last time. "Okay, Teddy," I whispered. "Let's go show them what the arena looks like." I swiveled back to my desk, opened a new browser tab, and booked a one-way flight to Boston. The flight to Boston was turbulent, but my mind was perfectly still. I had spent 24 hours meticulously reviewing the final Neptune report, uploading the encrypted file to a secure Navy server, and emailing the access credentials to Commander Evans. I had also, in a moment of grim satisfaction, gone online and ordered a simple, navy blue floral cocktail dress from Nordstrom. It was, as Aunt Clara had suggested, something pretty. Phase 1, Infiltration, began the moment I stepped out of the cab not at my aunt's house in Boston, but at a rented hotel room in Newport, Rhode Island. My family didn't even know I was in town yet. The wedding wasn't just a wedding, it was a full-blown production. It was being held at The Breakers, one of the most absurdly opulent of the Gilded Age mansions in Newport. It was a monument to the kind of old money and social climbing that my father, the carpenter, had despised. As I walked up the long drive, I felt like I was entering a foreign country, or perhaps a battlefield. I could smell the ocean, just like in San Diego. But here it was, mixed with the cloying, expensive perfume of 1,000 blooming roses and the faint, sweet smell of champagne. Everything was too much. There were literal towers of champagne glasses stacked higher than my head. There was a string quartet playing, of all things, a classical arrangement of a Taylor Swift song. The lawn was a sea of pastel designer labels, men in seersucker suits, and women in fascinators that looked like exotic birds. The guests weren't just dressed, they were armored. They were peacocking, sizing each other up, their smiles bright and brittle. This was their world, their arena. And into this arena walked Logistics Renee. I had followed Objective 1 to the letter. My hair was pulled back in a neat, unassuming bun. The navy blue floral dress was modest to the point of being invisible. No makeup, save for a light touch of mascara. I looked, as my father would have said, respectable. I looked harmless. I saw her before she saw me. Aunt Clara was holding court near the entrance, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her diamonds glittering. When she spotted me, her eyes did a quick, worried scan. Then, seeing my dress and my deliberately subdued appearance, a wave of profound relief washed over her face. She glided over, not walked, glided, and placed her cold, manicured hands on my shoulders. "Renee, darling," she cooed, that silky New England voice in full effect. She leaned in to air-kiss both my cheeks. "You made it, and look at you." She pulled back and gave me a final, approving look down. "Oh, honey, you look just normal. That's wonderful. So appropriate. I told you a little dress would be nice." Normal. That was the last insult. The final confirmation. To her, normal was the highest compliment she could pay me, because her greatest fear was that I would show up as myself. "It's a beautiful party, Aunt Clara," I said, my voice quiet and flat. "Isn't it?" She beamed. "Just perfect. Now just relax, have some champagne. But don't." And here, her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know, talk too much. Especially not to him." She subtly tilted her head toward a cluster of men by the bar. "That's Mr. Jennings, the tall one, talking to Mark. He's the guest of honor. Just steer clear, dear. Let Mark handle him. We need this to be perfect." "I understand," I said. "Good girl," she chirped, patting my cheek as if I were a dog that had just learned a new trick. Then, she was gone, gliding away to greet a senator. Phase 1, complete. I was in. I was invisible. I was exactly the person they wanted me to be. I walked past the champagne tower and picked up a glass of sparkling water with a twist of lime. I found a quiet spot on the edge of the terrace overlooking the Atlantic. I was executing Phase 2. Observe. I watched my cousin Mark. He was glowing, his face flushed with champagne and pride. He was practically attached to Jennings's hip, laughing too loudly at his jokes, nodding vigorously at everything he said. Mark was in full-on salesman mode. I watched Jennings. He was in his late 50s, with a golfer's tan and an air of absolute, unquestioned authority. He looked bored. He was nursing a scotch, letting Mark do all the work, his eyes occasionally scanning the crowd. He was the shark, and Mark was the pilot fish, cleaning his teeth. I stood there alone, sipping my water, a single, invisible soldier on a reconnaissance mission. The noise of the party, the laughter, the clinking glasses, all of it faded into a dull roar. For one brief, dangerous second, I felt a wave of doubt. What am I doing? This was my cousin's wedding. My family. This whole plan. Was it just petty? Was it revenge? Was I really about to detonate a bomb in the middle of this party, all because my feelings were hurt? The weight of what I was about to do, to Evans, to Jennings, to my own family, suddenly felt immense. I felt a familiar, cold loneliness creep in. I instinctively reached into the tiny pocket of my simple dress. My fingers closed around the familiar, cool brass of my father's compass. I gripped it, hard. I remembered his words. "Don't let them make you lose your way, girl. They're just playing pretend. You're doing the real work. I remembered Mark's text. I need him. I remembered Commander Evans's voice. This isn't revenge, it's justice. Don't let them cheapen you. The doubt vanished. The coldness in my hand was replaced by a cold, hard resolve in my chest. This wasn't petty. This wasn't about my hurt feelings. This was about the truth. It was about all the other Renees in my family, past and future, who were told to be normal. It was about the sailors on my ships. It was about my father's legacy of real work. This wasn't revenge. This was a course correction. I let go of the compass and looked up, my focus sharpened. My battlefield was no longer blurry. I knew my mission. And right on cue, Phase 2 came to an end. I saw her moving through the crowd. Chloe, the bride. She was in a mountain of white designer lace, her face flushed, her movements just a little too sharp. She was holding a champagne flute and was clearly several drinks in. She was laughing, but her eyes, when they scanned the crowd, were hard. She spotted me. Her laughter died. Her eyes narrowed. She saw me, the normal girl in the appropriate dress, standing alone, holding a glass of water. A look of undisguised privileged contempt washed over her face. She changed course. She began walking directly toward me, a predator locking onto an easy target. Mark, still fawning over Jennings, didn't even notice. I stood my ground. I didn't smile. I didn't look away. I simply waited. I felt my breathing steady, my pulse even out. The chaotic noise of the party focused into a single point. The approaching bride. This was it. The trigger. In my world, I thought, as she closed the distance, her expensive dress swishing like a threat, we call this waiting for the target to enter the kill zone. The trap was set, and the bait was me. She was almost on me now. Chloe, the bride, navigating the pristine lawn with a drunkard's unsteady grace. The string quartet was still playing softly in the background, a gentle, classical melody that was the exact opposite of the tension coiling in my stomach. I stood perfectly still, my glass of water cool in my hand. I was the rock, and she was the wave about to break against me. She didn't slow down. She stopped just a foot in front of me, so close I could smell the expensive champagne on her breath and the sharp floral notes of her perfume. Her eyes, bloodshot and ringed with smeared mascara, raked over my simple navy dress with open, undisguised contempt. She let out a short, barking laugh. "Oh my God," she slurred, pitching her voice just loud enough for the surrounding guests, and more importantly, the nearby group containing her new husband and her father, to hear. "It is Navy Renee." I said nothing. I just waited. My heart was a steady, measured drumbeat. Let her open fire. "Mark told me you worked in, what was it, naval design or something," she continued, a nasty smirk playing on her lips. "What is that exactly? Do you, like, pick out the curtains for the battleships? Decorate them with flowers?" A few people nearby, a man in a bow tie and a woman clutching pearls, let out a nervous, sycophantic titter. They glanced at the bride, then at me, eager to be on the winning side of the joke. I saw Mark out of the corner of my eye. He was standing right next to Mr. Jennings. He heard her. He had to have heard her. He flinched, his face turning a blotchy, embarrassed red. But he didn't turn. He didn't defend me. He just looked away, pretending he hadn't heard a thing. Ashamed for me, not for her. That was it. The final betrayal. The trigger was pulled. I took a slow, deliberate breath. I didn't look at Chloe. I didn't even acknowledge her. I let a small, cold, professional smile touch my lips. My eyes lifted, looking past the bride, over her shoulder, and locking directly onto the real target, Mr. Jennings. He had turned, his curiosity piqued by the sudden, localized laughter. He was looking at us. I spoke. My voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was quiet, crisp, and cut through the ambient noise of the party like a surgeon's scalpel. "No, Chloe, I don't decorate them." My voice, my sudden calm, my utter lack of reaction to her insult made the small group fall silent. Even Chloe seemed momentarily confused. I'm the one, I continued, my eyes still locked on the CEO, who evaluates whether they are safe enough to send my people into combat, or if they're just billion-dollar coffins. The string quartet seemed to get louder in the sudden, icy silence that fell over our little group. Chloe's drunken smirk faltered. What? Mark, his face now a mask of dawning horror, started to take a step toward us. Renee, don't. But it was too late. The grenade pin was pulled. Mr. Jennings, his glass of scotch halfway to his lips, froze. His bored expression vanished. He pushed past a startled Mark and took 2 quick steps toward me. What did you just say? He demanded, his voice a low growl. Now I turned my full attention to him. I was no longer Navy Renee in a floral dress. I was Chief May in the taco. I looked him straight in the eye. I said, I'm the senior field evaluator for your hardware. I let the silence hang for a beat. Then I delivered the payload. The 3 phrases I had practiced in my mind. Chief Petty Officer Renee May. I saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes. He knew the rank. Senior Operational Specialist, Pacific Fleet. His face, which had been ruddy from the champagne, began to pale. He knew what that title meant. And I finished, am the lead signatory on the final field report for Project Neptune. Boom! The blood drained from his face. The color just fell. I watched him go from a ruddy pink to a ghastly pasty white in the space of 3 seconds. The big shot CEO, the man my family was desperate to impress, was looking at me as if he'd just seen a ghost. My God, he whispered, the scotch glass trembling in his hand. You're CPO, May. I am, I said quietly. Renee. Mark tried again, his voice cracking with panic. What are you doing? This is my wedding. Chloe just stood there, her mouth half open, her drunken brain trying and failing to understand the sudden, seismic shift in power. I just got off a VTC with the Admiral about your system, Mr. Jennings, I said, my voice all business. The 2.5-second lag in the targeting system, the one your engineers swore was a software glitch? It's not. It's a hardware flaw in the cooling module. It overheats under simulated combat load. That's impossible, Jennings stammered, but he was already sweating. I assure you, it's not, I said. And as of Utter 9, Saturday Friday, my formal recommendation to the Admiral is to... I never got to finish that sentence, because right at that moment, exactly 20 Huidvais, just as I had planned, a new figure appeared at the entrance to the terrace. He was a man in his late 40s, tall, with an air of absolute command. And in a sea of seersucker suits and designer pastels, he was a beacon of pure, stark white. It was Commander Evans. He was in his full, immaculate service dress whites. The gold braid on his visor glinted. The double rows of ribbons on his chest, medals for service, for valor, for combat, were a silent, powerful testament to a world my family knew nothing about. He didn't look at the bride. He didn't look at the groom. He scanned the crowd, located me, and began walking directly toward our group with long, purposeful strides. The entire party started to go quiet. The music faltered. People stared. This was not a guest. This was a presence. He stopped directly in front of me. He didn't smile. He brought his heels together with an audible click on the stone terrace and rendered a sharp, perfect salute. Chief Petty Officer May, he said, his voice carrying with the authority of a man born to command. I stood at attention and returned the salute. Commander. Evans dropped his salute and nodded. Ma'am, I apologize for the interruption. He turned his head just enough to include a terrified Mr. Jennings in the conversation. I've just received the preliminary after-action report on that Neptune test failure last week, Evans said, his voice cold and hard. The one where the guidance system melted. The Secretary of the Navy's office is displeased. They've requested a full in-person brief from you. He looked pointedly at me. No later than our 9 sequels, Monday. Be prepared to present your findings, Chief. All of them. The terrace, which seconds before had been filled with the sound of a string quartet and light laughter, was now utterly silent. The only sound was the distant crash of the Newport waves against the cliffs below. Commander Evans's words hung in the air, heavy and cold as anchor chain. Be prepared to present your findings, Chief, all of them. Aye, Commander, I replied, my voice steady. I dropped my salute. He nodded once, curtly, then turned his gaze. His eyes fell on the CEO. Mr. Jennings, I'll expect your full cooperation. We'll be in touch. He didn't wait for a reply. He simply turned on his heel and walked away, his white uniform cutting a path straight through the stunned, silent crowd of designer suits. The moment he was gone, the spell broke, but the party was irrevocably split. Two distinct bubbles had formed on that pristine lawn. The first bubble was the one I was in. It was small, intense, and terrified. Mr. Jennings, no longer the bored big shot, was now just a man, pale and sweating profusely through his expensive linen suit. Why wasn't I told? He hissed, rounding on me, his voice a panicked whisper. The cooling module, you're sure? The party, the wedding, my family. None of it existed anymore. I was back in the taco. Yes, sir, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. It's the same fault we red flagged in the Q2 trials, the one your engineers assured us was a software patch issue. It's not. My team ran the simulation 3 times. Under full combat load, the temperature spikes at the 18-minute mark, the system throttles to protect itself, and the guidance feed cuts out. If one of my fire control teams is in an engagement, that 2.5-second lag means they are blind. That performance is unacceptable, sir. It will not be approved. I spoke calmly, factually, but my words were hitting him like body blows. He was wiping his face with a silk pocket square. Jesus. Monday, 09. I need to make some calls. He was already pulling out his phone, stumbling away from me, and then, just as my bubble of professional crisis management was shrinking, the other bubble burst. Renee! It was Mark. He finally moved. He stormed over, his face a mask of puce-colored rage, dragging Chloe behind him. She was now openly sobbing, her mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. Renee, what the hell did you do? He yelled. The whispers among the guests instantly stopped. Everyone was watching. This is my wedding. This is my wife. You. With your soldier friend. He was sputtering, incoherent with rage. He was trying to re-establish the old hierarchy where he was the genius analyst and I was the weirdo cousin. He was trying to shame me back into my box. I just looked at him. The anger, the humiliation, the decades of pain. It was all gone. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel hurt. I felt nothing. Just a vast, cold quiet. Mark, I said, and my voice was so cold, so level, it stopped him mid-rant. He stared at me, confused by this new voice. Commander Evans and I said slowly, we're just discussing a matter of national security regarding a billion-dollar weapons system failure. I let that sink in. I looked at his red, furious face, his tuxedo, his weeping bride, and then I delivered the final boundary. The one I had been waiting my whole life to draw. You, I said, do not have the security clearance for this conversation. His mouth opened, and then it closed. He had no answer. There was no comeback. I had just defined the two worlds we lived in. His was a world of parties and money. Mine was a world of consequences and security clearances. And for the first time, his world had just slammed headfirst into mine and shattered. From across the lawn, I saw the final casualty. Aunt Clara. She hadn't moved. She was frozen in place, a statue of social horror. She was still holding her champagne flute. As I watched, the glass, which she must have been gripping too tightly, slowly, slipped from her numb fingers. It didn't crash. It landed on the soft, manicured grass with a dull, wet thud. The champagne pooled around her expensive shoes. She was staring at me, not with anger. Not with hatred. She was staring at me with the dawning, terrifying realization of what I actually was. Of the power I actually held. She was seeing, for the first time, not Navy Renee, but Chief Petty Officer May. And she was terrified. She had built her entire world on image, on connections, on who you knew. She had just watched her unimportant niece, the family problem, hold the career of the most important man at the party in the palm of her hand and crush it. I had broken her world, and I felt nothing but relief. Mr. Jennings, who had been frantically texting, looked up at me one last time. He looked humbled. He looked, for the first time, like a man who was genuinely scared. "Chief Petty Officer May," he said, his voice now respectful, I want to apologize for Chloe's behavior. She's young. She didn't understand." "No, sir," I said quietly. "She didn't." "And I want to thank you," he added quickly. Your candor. Your directness. We'll fix this. I'll have my best people on it first thing tomorrow." I just nodded. "You don't need to apologize to me, Mr. Jennings. Just fix the system, make it work. That's all I care about." He nodded, looking relieved. And then he hurried off, still on his phone, a man with a new, singular purpose. The shark had been redirected. I was alone again, in the center of the terrace. The string quartet had, disastrously, tried to start playing again, but the notes were weak and uncertain. The party was over. I looked at Mark, Chloe, and Aunt Clara. They were huddled together now, an island of misery. My family. I didn't go over to them. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say anything. I just turned. I walked off the terrace, across the lawn, and down the long manicured drive. No one stopped me. No one called out my name. When I reached the grand gates and stepped out onto the quiet Newport street, the cool, salty night air hit my face. I unpinned the bun in my hair, letting it fall loose over my shoulders. I took a deep, deep breath. I didn't feel victorious. Victory feels hot. This was not victory. This was liberation. It was the feeling of taking off a 50-pound rucksack you've been carrying for 30 years. I had carried their shame. I had carried their disappointment. I had carried the heavy, suffocating weight of their expectations and their judgment. For my entire life, I had been trying to earn a place at their table. I realized, as I walked down that dark street toward my hotel, that I didn't want their table. I had my own. And the weight was finally gone. I hadn't just given them a piece of my mind. I had given them back their shame. It was theirs to carry now. 1 year later. I stood on a parade ground at Naval Base San Diego. The sky was a painfully bright, cloudless California blue. The brass band was playing Anchors Aweigh. The air smelled of salt, jet fuel, and fresh-pressed uniforms. I was in my service dress whites, the same uniform Aunt Clara had found so masculine and frightening. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action, the 2-star admiral, the same one who had sat in my Neptune briefing, was reading the citation. It was for a different mission, a different crisis, a moment of chaos months after the wedding where things had gone sideways, and my team and I had to make impossible choices. With complete disregard for her own personal safety, Chief Petty Officer May's decisive leadership and unwavering courage. He finished reading. He pinned the silver star to my chest. The metal felt impossibly heavy. He saluted me. I saluted him back. "Congratulations, Chief," he murmured, shaking my hand firmly. "Thank you, Admiral," I replied. I turned to face the crowd. In the front row, I didn't see my blood. I saw my family. Commander Evans was there, beaming, giving me a sharp, proud nod. My entire team, the young sailors I'd trained, the ones I'd fought for, the ones who called me chief, were on their feet, whistling and cheering so loudly that the Admiral had to clear his throat to restore order. They were my family, the ones I had chosen, the ones who had chosen me. This was the validation I had spent my whole life seeking, and it had nothing to do with a mansion in Newport. It had nothing to do with a last name in Boston. It was validation I had earned, validation forged in pressure, responsibility, and service. Later that day, back in my quiet office in Coronado, I found a thick, cream-colored envelope on my desk. It was from Mr. Jennings. Inside was a formal, typed letter. He officially thanked me for my invaluable and candid analysis of Project Neptune. He informed me that, after a massive overhaul of the engineering team and incorporating all of my team's recommendations, the new Neptune 2 system had just passed its final trials with flying colors. It was being fast-tracked for fleet-wide deployment. Your integrity, he wrote, forced this company to be better. We are in your debt. But tucked inside that formal letter was a smaller, handwritten note on his personal stationery. P.S. It read, I thought you might appreciate knowing that Mark and Chloe's marriage did not in fact last the summer. I believe the term is irreconcilable differences. She's no longer part of his or my world. I heard through the grapevine she's now an unpaid intern at a PR firm in New York. She is, as you might say, learning a great deal. I read the note, and a small, ironic smile touched my lips. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel vindictive. I just felt a quiet sense of balance. The universe, it seemed, had its own way of conducting after-action reports. I put the letter aside. The Neptune project was a success. That was all that mattered. Life moved on. The seasons changed. I led my team. I did my work. I mentored young sailors. I found a quiet peace in the rhythms of my life. The early morning runs, the smell of strong coffee in the briefing room, the deep satisfaction of a job done right. Then, several months later, on a cool November afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was Thanksgiving. I was in my small apartment in San Diego, the windows open to the sea breeze, listening to an audiobook and preparing a quiet meal for myself and a few friends from the base who also had nowhere to go. A text message. From a number I hadn't seen in over a year. It was from Mark. Hey Renee, it read. Are you coming home for Thanksgiving? Mom. Aunt Clara. We all get it now. We really do. We're so proud of you. We miss you. I stared at the words on the screen. We're so proud of you. This was it. This was the sentence I'd waited my entire childhood to hear. This was the validation I'd broken myself trying to win. For a moment, my breath caught. The ghost of the little girl in the girl boss mug, the girl called a travel agent, stirred inside me. And then, she was gone. I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, no lingering bitterness. Just a profound, calm, and total indifference. The words, which would have meant the world to me a year ago, now meant nothing at all. They were just letters on a screen, a signal from a distant foreign star whose light had taken too long to reach me. I had already moved on. I looked away from the phone. On my desk, there was a framed photo. It wasn't of my family in Boston. It was a picture of my team, taken after a grueling 3-day exercise. We were all covered in grease, sweat, and dirt, exhausted, but grinning from ear to ear, huddled together on the deck of our ship. That was my family. The ones who saw me. The ones I'd bleed for. I silenced the phone. I didn't reply to the text. I walked back to my kitchen, turned up the volume on my book, and continued chopping vegetables for the friends who were on their way. My family was coming over. I finally understood. My whole life, they had wanted Navy Renee. A faint, watered-down, appropriate version of me. A hobby. A girl in a pretty dress. They couldn't handle Chief Petty Officer May. They couldn't handle the woman who held the power of no over their billion-dollar deals. They had mistaken my silence for weakness. They mistook my desperation for their approval as my defining trait. But in my world, the world of real work, of real stakes, silence doesn't mean weakness. It means a plan is in motion. It means I'm listening. It means I'm observing. And it means that when I finally do speak, my voice will be the only one that matters. The echo of honor, I learned, is so much louder than the noise of family. And it's the only sound I answer to now. Thank you for listening to my story. My journey taught me that true validation doesn't come from those who refuse to see you. It comes from within, and from the family you choose. The people who respect your truth and honor your service. If my story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to fight to define your own worth against the expectations of others, please let me know in the comments below. Your stories matter. Hit that like button and be sure to subscribe for more stories of resilience, honor, and finding your own dawn. You are not alone.